Parasite Eve II is an action role-playing survival horror video game released exclusively for the PlayStation. The game was developed by Square and published in Japan in 1999 and in both North America and, unlike the previous game, in PAL regions in 2000. It is the sequel to Parasite Eve and the second game in the series of the same name. Parasite Eve II is set several years after the events in the original game. The protagonist from the first game, Brea, also features in this game as the playable character. She becomes involved with another outbreak of mitochondrial creatures. Gameplay diverges from the previous game, battles take place in real time and the area of action is less restrictive. The approach is more typical of traditional survival horror games, although some role-playing elements are retained. The game was well received by critics, although it was criticized for using a control system that was seen as being outdated. Gameplay: Parasite Eve II is an action role-playing survival horror video game. Character control is accomplished in a traditional survival horror manner. AR is able to move forwards, backwards, and pivot left and right. Camera movement is limited, generally being confined to a single view of a room or area, and cannot be altered by the player. Unlike Parasite Eve, there is no active time bar that governs the order of actions during a battle. Battles take place in real time, so the player is free to act as they see fit. Another contrast is the absence of the range dome seen in the first game, allowing the player to shoot at off-screen targets and engage targets from a safe distance. There are also no random battles. Enemies will be found wandering in plain view, hence allowing the player to avoid confrontations and plan strategies. Aiming, as with most other games of this genre, is accomplished by cycling through the various lockable targets within AR's range. Equipment can be obtained through various methods, including finding, purchasing and creating items such as body armor, weapons, ammunition and tools. Unlike most other survival horror games, ammunition is almost never in short supply. While AR can only carry limited amounts of equipment with her, inexhaustible ammunition boxes exist in most areas and can be revisited as often as required for a top-up. This encourages the player to fight rather than run, which is essential to the gameplay as it is the only way to gain experience and thus for AR to become powerful enough to succeed. While equipment follows the original game's concept of being customizable, in general the weapons and armor are quite limited in the alterations available. Armor, which not only reduces damage but also affects the amount AR can carry, has the option of adding extra item slots up to a limit of 10. The parasite energies are divided into 4 areas, the offensive fire and wind elements and the defensive water and earth elements. Once the game has been completed, bonus items become available for the player should they choose to redo the game in replay mode. Other modes also become available, such as Bounty Hunter and Scavenger, which are more difficult for the player to complete. The most difficult mode, Nightmare, only becomes available after completing the game in Scavenger mode. Plot: the game opens to reveal Brea, the protagonist of the original Parasite Eve game, who is now an FBI operative in their Mitochondrial investigation and suppression team being dispatched on an urgent mission in central Los Angeles, where there have been reports of NMC sightings. The first chapter in the game puts AR in the position of investigating the Acropolis Tower, where she finds a slaughtered SWAT team and an NMC infestation. She soon discovers that the NMCs can take on human form, and eventually encounters a different type of creature. A humanoid artificial neo-mitochondrial creature called Golem No. 9. She encounters this NMC 3 times in the game. Golem No. 9 destroys the tower, but Brea, along with her colleague Rupert, who has been at the scene before she arrives, escape in a police helicopter. After a brief interlude, the next chapter finds AR in the desert town of Dryfield. It is nothing more than a truck stop on a seldom used highway, with a motel, garage and diner but little else. Upon arriving, she finds that Dryfield 2 is infested with NMCs. She later encounters a survivor and his dog, Flint, who will act as her source of news and equipment for much of the game. She later rescues Kyle Madigan, a private investigator who claims he is on a mission similar to AR's. He tells her about the shelter, a nearby underground facility that may hold the answers to the recent outbreak of NMCs. After spending some time in Dryfield, Brea and Kyle find an entrance to the shelter located in an abandoned mine. They part company and she proceeds to investigate the shelter alone. As Brea explores the shelter, she discovers that the NMCs are the result of genetic engineering in an attempt to artificially create superior life forms, and that in some way she is closely involved. The game's storyline unfolds through various animated cutscenes that appear at regular intervals when plot points are triggered. One of these reveals that the NMCs were created from her own DNA. Eventually Brea discovers the game's fourth and final area, the Neo-Ark, the entrance to which is concealed in the shelter. She finds out that the Ark facility was intended to be a showcase of NMC technology, divided into different habitats, with zoo-like visitor commentaries and viewing platforms throughout the area. Habitat containment has broken down and the NMCs are loose. This area is now infested with the creatures too. The goal in this area is for Brea to disable the power generator, which allows access to an area that could not be reached in the shelter. Returning to the shelter, and reunited with Kyle, Brea rescues a girl that has been manipulated into controlling the hostile NMCs. She also finds out that the girl, Eve, was created from her own DNA, making her, in a sense, Brea's daughter. Eve is later kidnapped by Number 9. Returning to the shelter entrance, Brea encounters a small army of golems, but is rescued by the U.S. Marines, who have been alerted by Brea's contacts at MIST. She later receives a gift from Mr. Douglas, via Flint, of supplies. She decides to use Flint to help her find Eve, giving him Eve's bear to let him track her scent. He leads her back into the shelter. Brea tracks Eve down to a room containing an enormous cocoon, to find Number 9 incorporating Eve into it. Kyle is there as well, apparently helping Number 9. Kyle eventually turns on Number 9, preventing him from placing Eve into the cocoon. After a cutscene showing a satellite weapon being fired per the President's orders, and Dryfield being wiped off the map, Brea and Kyle find themselves separated by a hole that has penetrated all the shelter's floors. She looks down to see Eve hanging onto a piece of debris on the edge of one of the lower levels. Eventually, the cocoon breaks open, having been dislodged by the impact of the weapon, revealing the largest NMC in the game. After defeating this creature, Eve herself transforms into a very fast and powerful winged NMC that resembles Melissa Pierce, Eve's second-to-last form from the first game. Again Brea must fight. Once this final battle is concluded, various cutscenes are shown depending on the actions of the player during the game. The good ending being Brea adopting Eve as her sister with help from MIST. 1 year later, Pierce gives them 2 tickets to the American Natural History Museum in NY, where they meet Kyle Madigan again. Audio: the score for Parasite Eve II was composed by Naoshi Mizuta and arranged by Hiroshi Nakajima. It took Mizuta a year and a half to compose the soundtrack. He states he was given quite a bit of freedom in his composition, and drew most of his influence from watching the game's already completed scenario. The game's music is depicted as being much more ambient than its predecessor. The sound effects of Parasite Eve II were influenced by futuristic and sci-fi themes. David Bowie, a massive fan of the previous installment, stated his desire to work on the project from its inception. He provided the unidentified voice in the stone puzzle outside the Glass Research Center. Only half the voices were used, but the sound clip David was used as a tribute. The 66-track 2-disc Parasite Eve II original soundtrack was released by G-Cube on December 20, 1999 in Japan. The soundtrack was released in North America by Tokyopop on September 12, 2000. Reception: Parasite Eve II received positive reviews from critics. It received a score of 78.46% on GameRankings and 79/100 on Metacritic. The game sold over 220,000 copies in Japan during 1999. It broke the 1 million unit sales mark by February 2004, with 0.43 million sold in Japan and 0.66 million sold in the rest of the world. In late 2000, The game was re-released as part of the Square Millennium Collection along with a figure of AR and a portrait of her character model, Yumiko Shiku. The game was re-released as part of the Fson Books bestseller line by Sony in 2002. Re-release: in early September 2010, posts made on Twitter in relation to the spin-off titled The Third Birthday suggested that Parasite Eve I and II would be added to the PlayStation Network's game download service. On October 28 these rumors were proven to be correct, with Parasite Eve being given a November 4 release date and Parasite Eve II arriving on the PlayStation Network in Japan on November 24. Parasite Eve II was released on the North American PlayStation Network on August 23, 2011. References. External links: Parasite Eve II at the Internet Movie Database, Parasite Eve II at Moby Games, Parasite Eve II original soundtrack at Music Brains.